Hey everyone, this is Kyle with A Lighter Mind. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Now let's get into it. Have you ever had a difficult time setting up limits and rules within your personal relationships? Have you ever had a difficult time saying the word no, or have you ever let people take advantage of you? This is something that I have personally struggled with for many years, and at times I found that I was unable to stand up for myself and my needs. The good news is that throughout my recovery journey, I have found a healthy way to set boundaries within my life. Today, I would like to discuss personal boundaries. Our first stop on this boundary journey is to discuss the types of personal boundaries. According to therapistaid.com, there are multiple types of personal boundaries. These range from physical boundaries to boundaries involving time. It's important to note how we show up in each one of these experiences because we will typically show up the same way across the board. The list of these types of personal boundaries is physical, intellectual, emotional, sexual, material, and time. The reason that it's important to understand the types of boundaries is because being self-aware about how we show up in certain situations can give us insight into what areas of life we need to work on to grow. To go a bit further into understanding these types of boundaries, I'll give a brief explanation as to what each of these are. Therapistaid.com states that physical boundaries refer to personal space and physical touch. They continue by stating that healthy physical boundaries include being aware of what is physically appropriate and what's not within our relationships. Intellectual boundaries refer to our thoughts and ideas. Having healthy intellectual boundaries means having an awareness of appropriate discussion and respecting others' ideas. Now, when we're talking about our feelings, that's when emotional boundaries come in. Having healthy emotional boundaries refers to when to share and when not to share personal information. Sexual boundaries refer to the physical, emotional, and intellectual aspects related to sexuality. Having healthy sexual boundaries means having a mutual understanding and respect of limitations between sexual partners. Material boundaries are all about money and possessions. Setting limits around what we materialistically share and with whom is what constitutes a healthy material boundary. And finally, time boundaries are concerned with how a person uses their time. Having healthy time boundaries means that a person should set enough time aside for each aspect of their life, including work, hobbies, and relationships. What a mouthful that was. But now that everyone has a vague understanding of the types of personal boundaries, I would like to talk about porous and rigid boundaries. During my explanation of the types of boundaries, I give examples of what healthy boundaries are supposed to look like. It's important to understand that healthy boundaries aren't something that everyone possesses. This doesn't make you a failure, and it also doesn't mean that it isn't possible to learn healthy boundaries. Our upbringing, our social settings, and various other factors are what influence how we set personal boundaries. Now, it's entirely possible that these factors have not set us up to set successful, healthy boundaries. Being aware of how we set boundaries is valuable insight, because knowledge is power, and power allows us to influence change over our behavior. The first way that we may set boundaries are with rigid boundaries. Rigid boundaries are characterized by being unlikely to ask for help, being protective of personal information, and avoiding close personal relationships. Having rigid boundaries means keeping others at a distance to remove the possibility of rejection. Having rigid boundaries can lead to us feeling detached from others because they make it very difficult to be vulnerable. On the other hand, we have porous boundaries, which are the opposite of rigid boundaries. Individuals with porous boundaries typically overshare information, have a difficult time saying no, and they tend to over-involve themselves in others' problems. Having porous boundaries means depending on the opinion of others and fearing rejection if we don't comply. Having these types of boundaries can lead to us feeling tired and overwhelmed because we typically overschedule ourselves. Now we have an understanding of the types of personal boundaries and the possible ways that we set boundaries. I'd like to conclude this video by talking about what healthy boundaries are supposed to look like. Healthy boundaries are crucial when it comes to healthy communication. Healthy boundaries can increase our self-esteem, they can allow us to remove toxic people and behaviors from our lives, and they can truly increase our overall sense of well-being. While using healthy boundaries, we're able to identify our wants and needs, and then we're able to communicate them. We're also able to share information in an appropriate way. Like I've said previously, healthy boundaries aren't something that we all possess naturally. They are a learned skill. Here are some tricks and tips that I've learned when it comes to setting healthy boundaries. One of the most valuable weapons in my boundary arsenal is being able to say the word no. This is particularly useful if you have porous boundaries. No has a profound effect because it allows us to spend more time doing the things that we enjoy, and if we use it often enough, we remove the need to people please. It's also important to note that within healthy boundaries, we must accept when others say no to us, and remember not to take things personally. For those of us with rigid boundaries, I found that it's pertinent to listen to try to understand rather than waiting to respond. When we have rigid boundaries, we tend to want to win arguments, and we value winning over understanding. The truth is that there are no winners in healthy communication. Reminding ourselves to take a deep breath when we're getting heated and then aiming to understand the other person's perspective will slowly transform rigid boundaries to healthy boundaries. By doing this, we will have learned how to communicate more efficiently. I've also found that valuing my own opinion and not compromising my values for the sake of others has helped me tremendously. While not compromising our values for the sake of others is easier said than done, I have found that when I am not comparing my life to others, I am able to focus on myself, my needs, and my values. Being able to focus on those things specifically allows me to acknowledge that my life is worthy. And understanding that we are worthy of setting boundaries is one of the most important steps. One of the other important segments of setting a healthy boundary is understanding what our personal limits are. They are typically easy to find because when someone else crosses them, it makes us uncomfortable, afraid, or even angry. It's important that we visualize and name our personal boundaries so that we can draw our line in the sand. Being willing to openly communicate with others when they cross that line is a great first step to setting a boundary. An easy way to approach this is by saying something like, "I understand that you're frustrated right now, but I would appreciate it if you wouldn't speak to me like that." Or something like, "Those types of jokes make me uncomfortable." Once we make someone aware of our boundaries, they will oftentimes respect them, but no one is perfect. So it is essential that we stand behind our boundaries and remind them if they cross that line again. Developing healthy boundaries is something that takes time, and we must remember to show ourselves compassion while we make the transition. We will mess up a boundary here and there, but remember, this path is about progress and not perfection. Understand that you and your needs are valuable and you deserve better.